Sagar? Okay. Yeah, it's being recorded. So yeah, you can start.
Harnas, present your screen.
It's saying that the host disabled screen sharing.
Yeah, Sagar, and can you enable screen sharing for Farnaz?
Yeah, but I did now.
Okay.
Okay.
Is the screen visible?
Yes, it's visible.
Yeah.
Okay. So, a warm welcome to everyone. Here comes our final presentation on gamma ray theory cohort. We are glad to present you our final presentation here. Next slide.
Just a second. Wait a minute. Yeah.
So moving on, we have total 9 team members here, starting with Furnas, Jyotika, Manjima, Lalita, Prati, Rohan, Sarath, Sumedha, Bipin, authored and mentored by Hardik Medi. So moving on to the next slide, we have.
I'm sorry, I'll share once again. The slides are not changing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are the targets set for the project. We had 6 weeks totally, and the first week was dedicated to learn on the Python basics here, and we have been dealt with the Pandas basic too. And the week 1 was dedicated in learning on the relativistic electrodynamics by Vikrant, and we had a group presentation on the electromagnetic waves and how it acts as the messengers and all those. So week 2 was dedicated in learning about the stars, formation of stars, and stellar process. And we worked on an article related to the formation of stars. So that's how we could get an insight into our project topic and all those stuff. So week 3, moving on, we had a group discussions among team members related to the topic gamma ray burst from supernova, and we did a brainstorming and all those topics. So we came up with 5 parameters. So moving on with week 4, we read through the papers in which we had the 5 parameters. So we read through the papers involved to that, and we did a literature survey on all those problem statements. So moving on to the week 5, we detailed analysis on the source of gamma ray bursts, how the gamma ray bursts are produced from the sources, and what are the processes involved in driving those gamma ray bursts from supernova. We did a detailed analysis, and we worked on that. So week 6 was finally dedicated to write report, and we reduced the error in that, and we finally come up with a presentation to present you all. So this was the objective we came up with. So here we dealt with sources producing gamma ray bursts and what are the processes involved in producing those gamma ray bursts from those sources. This was the objective we came up with and the problem statement even. So these were all the initial points we kept it in our mind. So those are the 5 parameters, one being supernova, another being its types, third being the gamma ray burst, fourth being the long GRBs and short GRBs, and 5 being the process involved. So these were the parameters taken into account so that we could do a detailed analysis on our project and as well. So moving on, we have gamma ray burst. So what are these? First, moving on to that, we can deal with what are gamma ray bursts actually. So what are gamma ray bursts? Gamma rays has small wavelength, which is less than 1 nanometer. As we know, wavelength is inversely proportional to the energy involved. So gamma ray has small wavelength. So it obviously tells us that it has high energy too, and it lies in the electromagnetic spectrum. So there are many events which produces gamma rays. So here we deal with the gamma ray burst produced from the supernova.
So as you all can see on the screen, supernovae are powerful and extremely luminous stellar explosions. The name supernova comprises of 2 Latin words, super and nova, Nova here means new because the luminosity of a supernova is such that it looks like a temporary new star. And supernova again highlights the fact that it is highly energetic and extremely luminous. It differentiates it from a normal nova. Basically, a supernova is a part of the life cycle of a big massive star. It actually occurs when they actually die and they have no more fuel to keep on burning. This explosive death of a star is called supernova. When I'm saying extremely luminous, then it actually means extreme in the literal sense. If you don't believe, then here's a quick fact file for you all. These bursts are so bright and luminous that they can even outshine their own whole galaxy temporarily for a while. Next slide, please. Usually after supernova, it may be possible that nothing significant is left over as the remains of the event. In some cases, but in some other cases, these explosions actually are a bit significant to us. The death event of a star can actually be the birth moment of a neutron star or even a black hole. Furthermore, our main topic of interest, gamma ray bursts, are also intimately related to supernova, as supernova produce gamma ray bursts as well. A detailed discussion on this relation will be held later in this presentation only. Although there are several mechanisms by which a supernova actually occurs depending on various conditions and constraints. Major mechanism among all those is iron core collapse. Very massive stars undergo core collapse when nuclear fusion becomes unable to sustain the core against its own gravity. It may cause violent expulsion of the outer layers of the star, resulting in a supernova. Or the release of gravitational potential energy may be insufficient, and the star may collapse into a black hole or a neutron star with little radiated energy. More specifically, the massive star may develop an iron core larger than the Chandrasekhar limit. It becomes unable to balance between the gravity and the pressure and thus collapses. Over to Sumedha.
Yeah. So these supernovas releases several solar masses of matter and expel it out in the space. And these have velocities that are almost closer to the speed of light, thus creating shock waves. And this shock wave pushes the interstellar medium together, and that results in the expanding shell of gas. And these are called as the supernova remnants. So due to high pressure and temperature in the gas shell, new and heavy elements are created, like ranging it from oxygen to rubidium. So supernovas are also credited with star formation because when these shock waves are released, if nearby, if there is any stellar nursery or any nebula, then because of these shock waves, the gravitational collapse is triggered, and later a new star is born. Next slide. So SN 1987A is an example of a supernova which resulted by the explosion of a blue giant. So the nomenclature here is SN. SN stands for supernova. 1987 is the year in which it was discovered, and A. So this is one of the major type of nomenclature that is being used to name the supernovas. So the SN denotes the supernova, and the other four digits refer to the year in which it was discovered, whereas the letter A represents the first supernova of that respected year. So it ranges from A to Z, that is around 26 letters. And after this, the nomenclature is named as AA, AB, and so on. So this type of nomenclature is one of the most widely used nomenclature all around the globe. And now the future possible candidates for supernovas are like red giants like Betelgeuse and Antares. So, and also stars like Rho Cassiopeia, which is a yellow supergiant, is also predicted to go supernova soon. And based on the observed light curves and the absorption lines of the chemical elements of supernova are further divided into type 1 and type 2, and which is also further subcategorized. Over to Vipin and Manjima.
So after getting an idea about what supernovae are, now let's take a look at how we divide different supernovae in groups based on their different characteristics. Astronomers classify supernovae according to their light curves and the absorption line of different elements that appear in their spectra. As you can see here, if a supernova spectrum contains lines of hydrogen, it is classified type 2, otherwise it is type 1. There are further divisions in each of these supernova types. Concentrating on the type 1a supernova, first division is on the basis of silicon spectrum line observed. As you can see, type 1a supernovae have a silicon spectrum line, whereas the others don't. Let's take a closer look at type 1a supernova. So the type 1a supernova occurs in a binary star system having one white dwarf and a companion star. That companion star can be a white dwarf also. If the two stars are close enough or the companion star becomes a red giant, the white dwarf starts attracting mass from its companion star and from its surrounding. Slowly over time, when the white dwarf has accumulated enough mass to reach the Chandrasekhar limit, that is 1.4 times the mass of sun, that is 1.4 solar masses, it goes supernova. Unlike the general consequence of supernova, where a remnant star takes place of the progenitor star, no remnant star is left behind in type 1a supernova. Next slide, please. While the underlying principle behind nova and type 1a supernova may be similar, that is a white dwarf accumulating mass, only the surface of white dwarf explodes in a nova, and the white dwarf is not affected that much, whereas for a type 1a supernova, the star itself explodes and nothing is left behind. Type 1a supernova are candidates for standard candles. That is, they can be used to measure distances as the mass of the exploding star is known. That is 1.4 solar masses. We use it to calculate distance. As we know, no hydrogen lines are observed in the supernova. Now Manjima will be explaining type 1bc supernova. Over to you, Manjima.
So let me now explain about type 1b and type 1c supernova. Type 1b and type 1c are the categories of supernova that are caused by the stellar core collapse of massive stars. The stars which undergo type 1b or 1c supernova has lost most of their outer envelopes, mainly due to the strong stellar winds or due to interaction with close companions. Stars which undergo type 1b supernova have ejected most of the hydrogen in their outer atmosphere, while in the case of type 1c, have lost both the hydrogen and helium shells. The main underlying mechanism behind type 1b and c supernova is almost similar to that of type 2 supernova. Because type 1b and 1c are similar, they are collectively known as type 1bc supernova. So there are some evidences also showing that type 1c supernova acts as a source of GRBs. Next slide. It is also hypothesized that any hydrogen stripped type 1b or 1c supernova could result a GRB, which is dependent upon the geometry of the explosion. As they formed from rare massive stars, the rate of type 1b and 1c supernova occurrence is much more lower than corresponding rate of type 2 supernova. Because they share similar operating mechanism, type 1bc and various type 2 supernova are collectively called core collapse supernova. In particular, type 1bc can be also referred as stripped core collapse supernova because the hydrogen shell is stripped off. The both type 1b and 1c occurs in spiral galaxies and in regular galaxies, especially on starburst galaxies. That's all about type 1b and c supernova.
Let's take a look of the type 2 supernova. Means first let's have some basic information of the type 2 supernova. Mean the type 2 supernova is nothing but the rapid collapse and the violent explosion of the massive star. Massive stars are nothing but the having more mass, which is comparable to the sun. It is nearly 8 to 15 types solar masses, means the mass of the sun. when it is going to mean when the star having more mass, nearly 8 to 15 solar masses, we is going to collapse means it depend upon the mass which it is when it reaches to Chandrasekhar limit, comparing to the mass of the stars and the size of the star, it is going to explode. Actually, so many galaxies are there in the universe. As you know, in some galaxies, type 1a supernova are going to observed more. Like that, in spiral arm galaxies, the type 2 supernova are going to observe more. So, my friend Farjan is going to tell how the way two types of supernova is going to happen.
Way to type 2 supernova. Now, before a star collapses and leads to the formation of a type 2 supernova, the core of the star generally has hydrogen fused into helium. This releases thermal energy that heats the sun's core and provides outward pressure that supports the sun's layers against collapse in a process known as stellar or hydrostatic equilibrium. The helium produced in the core accumulates there since the temperature in the core is not high enough to fuse. Eventually, as the hydrogen at the core is exhausted, fusion starts to slow down and gravity causes the core to contract. This contraction raises the temperature high enough to initiate a shorter phase of helium fusion, which accounts for less than 10% of the star's total lifetime. In stars with fewer than 8 solar masses, the carbon produced by helium fusion does not fuse and the star gradually cools to become a white dwarf. White dwarf stars, when near a companion, may even become a type 1a supernova. Now, the collapse of stars with greater than 8 solar masses often lead to the formation of type 2 supernova. Over to Sarath, who will now explain the process of collapse of such stars.
Now we are going to know how the core is going to collapse. First, I told you in Truna means how the mass, depending on the mass of the star, the explosion is going to happen. When the core masses exceed the Chandrasekhar limit, all you know that the limit is nothing but 1.4 solar masses. Increasing the mass of the core means increasing the density of the core, and the pressure also increases. Degeneracy pressure of the star can no longer to support it. It is now increasing the pressure. It is no longer to support it. Then the outer part of the core reaches velocity 23% of the speed of the light is nothing but 70,000 kilometers per second as it collapses toward the center of the star is nothing but the implosion. I think everybody know about the implosion. Implosion nothing but the collapsing into the core. Nuclear reactions in its core generates an immense amount of energy. This keeps the star so hot that gas pressure pushes outwards and partially prevent the inward pull of the star's gravity. Due to the photon pressure produced that makes the star core glow out. During the core collapse, the blast wave slumps into the dense material above, which prevent the explosion. Instead of creating a supernova explosion, the star implodes, forming a black hole or a neutron star. The rapid shrinking core heats up, producing high energy gamma rays that decomposes iron nuclei into helium nuclei and free neutrons due to protogeneration. As the core density increases, it becomes energetically favorable for electrons and protons to merge via inverse beta decay, producing neutrons and elementary particles called neutrinos. Like this way, the neutrinos are going to produce. Now, as you know that the neutrinos are the rarely interactive with the normal matter. They can only particle that can escape from the core. Why not others? The core collapse phase is so dense and energetic, and means this means more gravitational force is having. So the neutrons carry the energies and accelerated the collapse. Means this makes the to reach the escape velocity when the explosion happen. When the neutrinos are released, the two neutrinos production mechanism convert the gravitational potential energy of the collapse into 10 seconds neutrino burst. releasing about 10 to the power of 46 joules of energy is going to release it. When during these 10 seconds neutrino burst, the collapse of the inner core is stopped by degeneracy, causing the impulsion to rebound and bounce outward. The energy of this expanding shock wave is sufficient to overlaying interstellar material and accelerate it to escape velocity. This makes the neutrinos to escape from the gravity of the core. This makes the material to produce new heavy elements. After the supernova, if the neutron star is left, we have some information. The core has initial temperature of about 100 billion kelvins. It means nearly nothing, but when you compare to the sun, core of the sun, it is nearly 10 to the power of 4 times the temperature of the sun's core. Depending on the initial mass of the star, the remnants of the core from a supernova form a supernova or a black hole. Now, Farnaz is going to tell how these again some classifications are there, how they are divided depending on which properties are divided. Farnaz is going to tell.
Thank you, Sarat. Now, classifications of type 2 supernova. When the spectrum of a type 2 supernova is examined, it normally displays Balmer absorption lines, that is, reduced flux at the characteristic frequencies where hydrogen atoms absorb energy. As we know, the presence of these lines is used to distinguish this category of supernova from a type 1 supernova. Now, type 2 supernova can be distinguished into type 2L and type 2P supernova based on the shape of their light curves. Type 2L, that is type 2 linear supernova, has a light curve that decays in a linear form after the maximum brightness of the light is achieved, as shown in the diagram. While the type 2P or type 2 plateau supernova remains bright for an extended period of time after achieving the maximum brightness, as depicted in the diagram of the plateau region. Type 2 supernova can be further classified into type 2N and type 2B supernova based on the presence of hydrogen emission lines in the spectra. In the type 2N supernova, the N denotes narrow, which indicates the presence of narrow or intermediate width hydrogen emission lines in the spectra. In the intermediate width case, the ejecta from the explosion may be interacting strongly with gas around the star, called the circumstellar medium. Whereas a type 2 supernova has a weak hydrogen line in its initial spectrum, which is why it is classified as a type 2 supernova. However, later on, the hydrogen emission becomes undetectable, and there is also a second peak in the light curve that has a spectrum which more closely resembles a type 1b supernova. This is how type 2 supernova can be classified into 4 types.
So moving on, we have gamma ray bursts here. So what are these gamma ray bursts? So these are nothing but the explosions which is occurring in the universe. It's not just an explosion, it's an energetic explosion. And do these gamma ray bursts occur in our solar system and near to the Earth? The answer is no. It occurs in the distant galaxies. Wherever these gamma ray bursts occur, there will be no life left behind because the energy released from the gamma ray bursts are such huge in amount. So we couldn't find any living beings present. So this is how we are able to confirm that gamma ray bursts occur in a distant galaxies. And during gamma ray bursts, we observe some chemical elements like chemical elements formed. So these chemical elements may even form new planets or new objects, all those things. So these planets in turn combine together, we call it as universe. So this is how gamma ray bursts are involved in shaping the universe indirectly. Over to Laita. Laita will be explaining about the reduction of all those things.
Lalita? Jyotika, could you please check once?
Yeah, I will do that.
Yeah, she's not in the meeting.
Actually observing nuclear weapons in space. They were testing on the nuclear weapons, but actually they found out gamma ray bursts occurring there. So this is how the gamma ray bursts are first detected.
I am going to tell you the discovery of gamma ray bursts. In Cold War, the US and USSR became enemies. Both sides had nuclear weapons. Both sides were testing nukes at every available opportunity. At the same time, both factions were becoming more adept to space travel, using satellites to spy on each other. Both were looking at the idea of orbiting platforms for which to launch nuclear weapons. They could just drop a bomb on an enemy within minutes. By the fear of this, the Outer Space Test Ban Treaty in 1963 forbade the testing or even the use of nuclear weapons in space. Among the signatories were US and USSR. Of course, neither of them trusted each other. The Soviets might have tried to test anyway, blowing up nukes on the far side of the moon where it couldn't be detected. Then the US launched a series of satellites called Vela. Nuclear detonation produces a flash of gamma rays, the highest energy form of light. The Vela satellites were designed to detect that higher energy pulses. 2 scientists were assigned to analyze the data. They were rigorously going through the observations, checking them for anything that looked like nukes. Every signal turned out to be a false one. But in 1969, they found their first hit, a flash of gamma rays seen by satellites. But there was a problem. Whatever caused the gamma rays, whatever caused the gamma ray events didn't look like a nuclear blast. The amount of gamma radiation and how it fades away with time were distinctive from a nuclear weapon. Over time, more and more of these mysterious gamma ray bursts were found. As analysis technique got better, it was found that they weren't coming from the surface of Earth nor from nearby space. These bursts were originated randomly in the space from deep space. Over to Jyotika.
So next slide. So as we know that gamma ray bursts are produced during supernova. So once after the supernova explosion, we know that huge amount of energy is released. So the gravitational energy released will be converted into 2 types, 2 fractions of energies in the form of fireball and other one being the neutrinos and the gravitational waves. So the energy released will be involved in creating these 2 forms. So what happens is that neutrinos and gravitational waves in turn reacts with the fireball, which consists of electrons, baryons, and gamma rays to produce gamma ray bursts. So this is how the gamma ray bursts are produced from the energy released during supernova. Neutrinos and gravitational waves in turn react with the fireball to produce the rays. Next slide. So as we said, gamma rays are produced by the reaction of fireball with both neutrinos and the gravitational waves. So we could obtain or see the electromagnetic radiation from the gamma ray burst. So these electromagnetic radiation is really based on the fireball, as in the case of long gamma ray burst, which was created by core collapse supernova, or in the case, or a fireball in the case of short gamma ray burst, which was created by binary star system explosion. Moving on to the next slide. Fanas will take over.
Now the classification of gamma ray bursts. Based on time duration and sources, gamma ray bursts are classified into 2 types, long gamma ray bursts and short gamma ray bursts. Long gamma ray bursts last for a few seconds or minutes. The source of long gamma ray bursts are core collapse supernova. So what is core collapse supernova? If the core of a massive star reaches Chandrasekhar limit, the degeneracy pressure exerted by an electron will not be able to overcome the gravitational pull of a massive star. As the mass reaches Chandrasekhar limit, gravitational pull also increases. At this point, the electron's degeneracy will not be able to counteract with the gravitational pull to maintain the hydrostatic equilibrium. So, the core of the massive star starts contracting due to the gravitational pull and eventually collides. This is called a supernova, core collapse supernova.
Supernova explosions are already extreme, but those that emit gamma ray bursts are even more so. The energy released by a supernova comes from its radioactive materials. But here, the scientists also discover discovered a star called magnetar. A magnetar is basically a rapidly rotating neutron star, which is formed by a core collapse supernova and is highly magnetized. The matter surrounding the magnetar is dragged around by the rapidly rotating neutron star, and some of the energy in this rotation is transferred to this matter, creating a very powerful magnetic field. This is why the supernova has a lot of extra energy and is very bright.
Long gamma ray bursts are associated with the brightest region of the galaxy, where most massive stars occur with supernova, with type 1a or type 1c supernova, with very few exceptional long gamma ray bursts.
Long gamma ray bursts are the endpoints of these massive stars. The rate of long GRB's production is approximately proportional to the rate of formation of stars.
Okay, let me explain about short gamma ray bursts. Events with a duration of less than 2 seconds, that is last for milliseconds, are short gamma ray bursts. It accounts for 30% of gamma ray bursts. Until 2005, no afterglow had been successfully detected from any short events, and only very little was known about their origin. When two neutron stars orbit each other closely, they spiral inward as time passes due to gravitational radiation. When the neutron stars meet, their merger leads to formation of either a massive neutron star or a black hole. The merger can also create a magnetic field that will be trillions of times stronger than that of Earth in a matter of 1 or 2 milliseconds. These events are believed to create the short gamma ray bursts. The binary stars results in kilonova to produce short gamma ray bursts. Over to Sumedha.
The another interesting feature when neutron star and neutron star merges together, a kilonova is formed. So a kilonova is a transient astronomical event that occurs in compact binary system. That is when two neutron stars merges together to form another big neutron star or maybe a black hole. And the bright afterglow that results from this formation is said to be the kilonova. A kilonova bears its name from its dramatic peak brightness, which is about 1,000 times that of a ordinary classical nova, and only a fraction as bright as a supernova. So kilonovas are considered to be the progenitors of gamma ray burst. These are thought to emit specifically the short gamma ray burst and strong electromagnetic radiation that is formed due to radioactive decay of heavy R process nuclei. Next slide. So R process, or the rapid neutron capture process, is a set of nuclear reaction that is responsible for the creation of approximately half of the atomic nuclei heavier than the iron, and these forms the heavy element. So these are this process is wherein atomic nuclei of one or more neutrons collides to form a heavier nucleus, thus forming heavier elements. Over to you, Jyotika. Okay, so yeah.
As we know that gamma ray bursts are classified in two types regarding the duration which those bursts last. So long gamma ray bursts will be lasting for more than 2 seconds in the universe and it fades. So short gamma ray bursts will be lasting less than 2 seconds and it fades there. So what a long gamma ray burst, as we could see in the picture, the core collapse of a massive star. So how does this core collapse occurs? So when the mass reaches above the Chandrasekhar limit as put forward by the Chandrasekhar, due to the over mass rate, the pressure and the density increases and the gravitational pull also even increases. So the pressure generated by the electrons will not be able to cope up with the gravitational pull. So the hydrostatic equilibrium is even lost here. So this is how due to the gravitational pull, the core starts shrinking and it results in a huge explosion, which is said to be a supernova. So that's how the gamma ray bursts are produced from the core collapse supernova, which is ejected in the two directions as a jet here. And moving on to short gamma ray burst, it lasts less than 2 seconds or milliseconds. That's the duration in which a short gamma ray burst lasts. It occurs in the binary star system. So binary stars are those which has common base center. Common base center in the sense it has a common center of mass. So as it has a common center of mass, it rotates around the common center of mass. Those two stars will be rotating around in the middle of the common center of mass. So what happens is those binary stars will exert gravitational effect on each other. So due to these gravitational efforts exerted by each other stars, what happens is one star accumulates or consumes the material from its companion star. So what happens? Companion star gets destroyed. And the star which accumulated material, consumed material, has even more mass, and it results in kilonova to produce gamma ray burst. So the gamma ray burst even here is exerting two directions of the jet. Moving on to next slide. So we know that long gamma ray bursts occur when white dwarf collapses or the core collapses on itself. And type 1a supernova is associated with long gamma ray bursts and short gamma ray bursts, whereas type 1bc and type 2 supernova are always associated with long gamma ray bursts. Moving on to the next slide. So these are the processes involved to produce gamma ray bursts from supernova, from the sources. So the first being synchrotron radiation, followed by inverse Compton scattering process, and the next one is synchrotron self-Compton process, and fourth being photon hadronic process. These are the four processes which are involved in producing the gamma ray burst from the sources like core collapse supernova or the merger of neutron stars. Over to Vipin.
Hello. Now the syncrotic emission is you guys going to know about the synchrotron radiation. Electromagnetic radiation emitted when charged particles are accelerated rapidly, which means they are subject to acceleration perpendicular to their velocity. Next, particles are relativistic and sometimes ultra-relativistic. The particles are relativistic is nothing but the particles relativistic matter is nothing but where the particles are moving at the speed of the light, near to the speed of the light. That means the process of emission is known as synchrotron emission radiation. Supernova remnants released from the supernova move greater than or equal to the speed of light. Supernova remnants is nothing but the material ejected in supernova explosion along with other interstellar material. These remnants have been swiped up by the passage of shock wave from the exploded star. Next, the that's only tunable light source. Tunable light source provided by the synchrotron radiation. This is an advantage. The tunable light source provide a wide range of accessible photon energy. Next slide, please. Electrons are cooled by the process, like by the process of synchrotron radiation. You are going to know about it. Synchrotron radiation from accelerated electrons is a promising mechanism for the origin of the gamma ray burst. The electrons are accelerated in the presence of magnetic field continuously by the activity of shock waves, which means accelerating interstellar medium into the expanding shell. These electrons are cooled by processes like synchrotron radiation, and by the another process also these electrons are going to cool. Inverse Compton effect. Within few minutes going to know about the inverse Compton scattering too. When the supernova first explode and shock wave is sent out through the star, when it passes through the interstellar medium, it continuously to expand it into the surrounding interstellar medium, creating a shock wave in the interstellar gas in the forward direction and also a shock wave in the reverse direction back into the supernova ejection. It is nothing, this process is going to happen in the impulsion. The shock wave also accelerated the interstellar medium into an expanding shell, which outputs abundant amount of synchrotron radiation due to the acceleration of the electrons in the presence of the magnetic field. This expanding shell surrounds an area of relatively low density into which the supernova eject expands freely, typically with velocities around 10,000 km per hour. Next, my friend Vipin is going to tell about the inverse Compton effect. Before going to that, let's have this video. Internal shock wave and external shock wave is going to happen. When the internal shock wave, during the internal shock wave, the gamma rays bursts are going to happen. During this, the synchrotron emission is going to, radiation emission is going to happen. This process is going to happen. Next, Vipin is going to tell you.
As we now know how shock waves help synchrotron radiation, let's take a look at how a reverse shock wave is formed and how it affects the GRB. A shell is formed in supernova ejecta as the explosion is instantaneous and a lot of material is shot out, most of which makes the outer region of the shell. Let's assume the shock wave to be spherical in shape with a radius r from its origin point. Next slide. Now, as most of the material is on the outer layer of the shell, the pressure inside the shell becomes lesser than the pressure on the surface of the shell. This pressure difference forces some of the ejecta to fall back into the shell, creating a reverse shock wave. This shock wave propagates back into the shocked matter once it begins to encounter the interstellar medium. The twice shocked material can produce a bright optical or UV flashes, which have been seen in few GRBs, though it appears not to be a common phenomenon. Beside these, some new signatures for reverse shock wave were also proposed, such as sub-giga electron volt photons, flashes, and high-energy neutrino emission, and early X-ray and gamma ray emission from synchrotron self-Compton and synchrotron radiation in the region of shock waves. The reverse shock wave, sorry. Next slide. Now, like an extreme version of sonic booms produced by a supersonic motion of airplanes, the forward shock wave produces sudden large change in pressure and temperature behind the shock wave. That is the purple region, as you can see in this image. The hot, high pressure gas, the purple region, behind the forward shock expands and pushes back to the ejecta, creating a reverse shock that heats the ejecta, the orange region in this picture. Eventually, the reverse shock wave will transfer the cool ejecta, the blue region that's in the on the center of this stage, and heat it. Now, Rohan will take over to explain the process of inverse Compton scattering process.
So the next micro process is inverse Compton scattering. As the name suggests, it is the opposite process of what we call Compton scattering. So it becomes essential to discuss about Compton scattering first before we go on into its inverse process. Compton scattering is the scattering or the collision of photons with a charged particle, usually which is an electron. Furthermore, it is an inelastic collision that makes sure that the kinetic energy would not be conserved in this process. And this is the fact which will make the complete difference. If this collision results in the decrease of the energy of a photon, then we call it a Compton effect. So it becomes easier to guess what would happen in its inverse process. Inverse Compton scattering involves the inelastic collision of a low energy photon with an ultra-relativistic electron, so that the photon gains energy and electron loses energy. Here, ultra-relativistic electrons are those moving near to the speed of light. Next slide, please. Thus, this process aims at producing high-energy photons from the initial low-energy ones. It is also said to be an important source of gamma rays. Here, the kinetic energy of electrons gets transferred to the photons, which further increases the energy of photons and subsequently decreases the wavelength of photons so that it may fall into the regime of the wavelengths of gamma rays. Next slide, please. Talking about the origins of these particles which are interacting in this particular kind of collision, the photons can be the ones which were released during the supernovae, or the photons released during synchrotron emission. And the ultra-relativistic electrons are also released during supernovae. So this is how gamma ray bursts are produced via this inverse Compton scattering process. Over to Jyotika.
So moving on, we have synchrotron self-Compton process. As we know that in synchrotron radiation, electrons are accelerated in the magnetic field to produce photons, and in inverse Compton scattering, both photons and electrons interact, so these photons get scattered to higher energies. So in both these processes, there occurs electrons which are involved in both the synchrotron process as well and in inverse Compton scattering process as well. So what happens is these same electrons which are involved in the synchrotron radiation and the inverse Compton scattering process may even react with photons produced during the synchrotron radiation and scatter them to higher energies by inverse Compton scattering. So what happens is that these electrons react with photons to produce gamma ray bursts. That's why we call the gamma ray bursts are produced during synchrotron self-Compton process. Next slide. So, as the name sentences, the upscattering of photons by the same electrons involved in both processes said to be synchrotron self-Compton process. GRBs are produced during this process where the photons are scattered to higher energies. So that's why we name a synchrotron self-Compton process to be inverse Compton scattering. So it's otherwise called inverse Compton scattering. Next slide. Vipin will take over.
Now, the process of synchrotron radiation and inverse Compton scattering are effective means of creating high energy gamma ray photons, but there are other mechanisms. One of the most important is the decay of neutral pions created in collision between relativistic protons and nuclei of atom and ions of the interstellar gas, which is the photon hadronic process. Next. Yeah, so this is the reaction that we have. We get charge and neutral pions here. The charged pions here decay into muons and neutrinos. The charged muons produced here further decay to produce neutrinos and antineutrinos along with electron and positron pair from their respective charges. Next slide. In contrast to the charged pions, the neutral pions decay into the pair of gamma ray, and this process only takes about 10 to the power minus 16 seconds. Those were all the major models that have been able to explain the process of gamma ray burst effectively. Now, Jyotika will be concluding this session.
So, here in our project, we dealt with the sources like core class supernova and merger of neutron stars, or the merger of neutrons and a black hole, which is involved in producing gamma ray bursts, are analyzed. And we had a detailed study on the process involved in producing these gamma ray bursts from those sources like core collapse. So this is what we came up with, and this is how the project has been carried out. Moving on to the next slide, we have references. These were the references and the websites we clicked on, and we did a problem statement analysis and literature survey to come up with the awesome project here. So a great thanks to Nakshatra Sciences and Collaborative Research and for providing us such an awesome project, and a great thanks to our team members who really showcase their efforts in this. And I'm really glad to be we are really glad to be a part of this program. So we are open to questions now.
So, any questions? Okay then. So it is a really good session actually. I like the structure of the presentation. Like at the beginning, you guys showed what you did all throughout the weeks, and then you started your topic. So it was really good, actually. Okay, Vikrant is asking something. Okay, the Vikrant's question is, when the GRBs are detected here, is the redshift taken into account?
So we didn't involve Redshift in this project. We didn't do an analysis on that. We just did an analysis on the process and the sources.
Yeah, I mean, okay, one more. Why are type 2 supernovae not observed in elliptical galaxies?
I guess the Farnaz or Vipin could answer on this.
Again, means depending upon the mass, means the maybe the galaxy, elliptical galaxy is too early. Means in elliptical galaxies the stars having low age means less masses, like that. Depending on the mass, you can came to know that the type 2 supernova are not observed in the elliptical galaxies. For the first question, I think yes, we are going to take the redshift into account.
Okay, so about the type 2 supernova, the thing is, just to clarify one thing here, in elliptical galaxies, most of the stars are old, and that's why when you look at the picture, it's most of them are yellowish. But for type 2, you need young blue stars, and blue stars means young, right? So
Yes.
yeah, so you need young stars for type 2 supernova, since they'll contain the hydrogen lines, and this is why type 2 are not observed in elliptical galaxies. Okay. So yeah, it was a good presentation. Everyone did well. And I think this is the end of the project. So we still have to work on the paper, but I and Jyotika will work on it. And yeah, if there are no more questions, we can end.
Hey everyone, just wanted to say it was a really interesting and very well put together presentation. So yeah, I'm glad that all of you learned a lot, and hopefully the last 4 to 5 weeks were very informative for you all. So do make sure all of you contribute to the final paper, because it's really important to have at least a small contribution to the final product. And the top 5-6 people who are really interested in taking it forward, do get in touch with Hardik, and we can figure something out for those of you who are interested in either diving into it more deeply, or taking it forward to a conference, anything like that. You can get in touch with Hardik or me. So yeah, do let us know. But overall, great work. Congratulations on finishing it.
And I need to really thank team members and Hardik here. And it's not possible without the team. And it's the team play. It's a good team play. We had a good team play, and so this is how we come up with our presentation and the project. And we had daily discussions and all. And even Hardik was explaining us and guiding us to the greater extent. And whenever we call him, he would just attend the meet. It was a really good dedication from you.
That's really nice to see that all of you had a collaborative experience. Also, we will continue certain sessions like, I think, playing around with Universe Sandbox, and exploring certain other phenomena like neutron stars and pulsars in detail. And I would just like to add that in September this year, in about a month, we will be launching something similar. But the projects will be a little bit more inclined towards cosmology. So if there are some people here interested in a completely different topic, let us know what topics they are. So we would really love your feedback on that. And we would also like to know what topics you're interested in. And one final thing, Hardik. So we'll be giving a form, a final form. So it's compulsory to fill that, and then everyone who fills that will get the certificate. So in that, there'll be a little bit about the feedback. Do mention, like I said, if you guys have very, different research interests, please make a note of it. What kind of problems do you exactly want to solve or tackle? So we'll try to create more opportunities like this. And we'll also try to bring in more speakers and mentors related to those topics.
Yeah, sure. And another note I want to mention here is thanks Nakshatra, because wherever in other private institutions or platforms, we really don't get in much interactive sessions, or we do not get interactive things to do. Like we have been able to interact with other groups as well, and it was a really good thing in Nakshatra that we could have interaction between many people. That's the thing I want to mention.
Thanks a lot for mentioning that. I think, we've always thought that the best kind of learning will happen amongst the peers, right? Apart from just lectures or whatever. I think first 2 to 3 weeks, we had like a lot of lectures and sessions where you were supposed to learn something. And then after that, there was a lot of freedom to kind of explore and just meet with your group. So hopefully that helped. Anybody else would like to give any comments, feedback about how it was, your personal experience, or maybe even from the project, what was your biggest takeaway point? Anyone else?
Yes.
I would like to add. I really enjoyed the process from reading up papers to writing, contributing to the main report, as well as interacting with all the members. I come from an engineering background, so I don't find I find it difficult to interact with people with similar interests. So this really helped to get in touch with people that are interested in similar things, as well as are as passionate about the same project, and that really helped. Made a lot of friends as well, and learned a lot. So really enjoyed the whole process. Looking forward to more projects.
Great, wonderful. Yeah, I really would encourage all of you to stay in touch. The Discord server is always, it's going to remain active, at least the virtual campus one. It'll always remain open for you. So if there are projects, so basically you will find something called clubs, right? When you go to the other Discord server, under those clubs, anyone is free to start their own project. They can start an open project is what we call it. So it can be a study group or an open project. So if you guys have ideas, then you can become a club leader and kind of start a small group of your own. But essentially keep in touch with each other, all the people you've met here. In an academic journey, you will never know when it becomes very important and valuable to have such people. So yeah. Anybody else would like to add to that?
Yes, this was my first project. Means I came up with it with the help of my friend Hardik. He only told me to join here. This was my first project. I have some low at conver me talking with others and in conversation. With this project, I learned a lot. I got some decision in which I am interested in that. I have some interest like that. And thanking you, Nakshatra, and my friends. Thanking you, Hardik. Thanks to everyone.
That's wonderful. I really do hope all of you had a little bit of time to see, to taste different subjects and figure out what you like Sarath said. Anybody else would like to add?
I think I'll myself add something. So yeah, all these weeks have been really fun actually. So meeting new people and learning a lot of new things, and also I also got to explain some things, so it was a fun time. And all of the team members here were very prompt and responsive, and they were also very dedicated towards the project. So yeah, it was a really fun project, and especially this presentation. I really loved the presentation, and yeah, that's all.
Okay, and great job, Hardik. I mean, he just joined us about maybe 6 to 8 months back, and he's like a student, right? Like everyone else here. So I think there is a lot of transformation and learning in this process where you become a leader for a group, and you start utilizing certain skills that are you're not even aware of, right? So all of you who had that opportunity this time to take some amount of ownership and leadership, I hope that it helped you, and I hope you're more confident as a person. So that also matters. So yeah. And yeah, all of us are here. Anyone from the core group, anyone you want to get in touch with, you can please feel free to DM us at any point of time on Discord or Telegram. So yeah, apart from this, we can have one final meeting when you guys are done with the report. And I would love to talk to you all just one more time to see if there is anything left that you feel is missing, or if some of you are interested in taking it forward a little bit more seriously. So let's do that in about a week, right? Hardik, when do you want to have the tentative deadline for completing the report?
So yeah, and by the end of July, it'll be over. Everything will be sorted out.
Okay, we'll do that then. Maybe by July 30th or August 1st, we can have the meeting. Okay.
Yeah.